Everyone, and welcome to the very first video of White Root Tarot's weekly series where either Leah or I will draw a card from one of our decks for the week and really consider what his message has for us. This week's card is the Tzolkin or Tzolkin. I have no idea how to pronounce this. I didn't even know what it was until I drew the card. This is from the Sacred Geometry Oracle deck by Francine Hart, which is a gorgeous oracle deck. If you want to know more about it, I'm going to put her information in the description so that you can go check it out because it's worth it. I highly recommend this deck. Um, so yeah, until I drew this card and read her description of it, I had no idea what a Tzolkin was. But it is a representation of the Mayan calendar. And the Mayan calendar has been around for like 25 centuries, but this is just one small representation of it, and it's called the Sacred Round. Um, so because I don't know what it really is, I don't feel qualified to talk about the Tzolkin itself, but I do want to talk about the symbolism that is in this card, like, and what it means to me personally. Um, and so, in Francine Hart's explanation of this card, she asks the reader to really consider what time means to them. In modern society, time has been monetized and itemized to the point where we become utterly beholden to the clock. I've been listening to Father Richard Rohr's lecture, like a series by Father Richard Rohr about Saint Francis. And he talks about how mechanized clocks were invented in Francis's time and that it completely changed the way that human beings conceptualize time. So instead of just living by the sun and the moon, now you had an actual itemization of the hours and the minutes in the day, which is fascinating to think about because we're so used to that in modern society that to not have that, I mean, our priorities would completely change. It would change the way we live on a fundamental level. And so it's worth considering, how would your life change if you didn't have a clock that you're essentially a slave to? How, like, what would your priorities be in that? Like, we're so used to thinking that, okay, I have exactly this amount of time for these activities, and then I have to get to this, and if you have kids, you have to get to the activities, and yada, yada, yada. And it's kind of exhausting. So, as a fun thought experiment, think about if you never saw a clock in your life, what would your life be like? Um, so that's interesting. Another thing that I really enjoy about this card is that it is a circular representation of time. And time is a very peculiar thing because, as itemized as we made it, as beholden we are to it, we don't actually understand the true nature of time. Or at least most of us don't. So we conceptualize and experience time as a linear line. But that's an illusion because time is actually circular. And if you want to get even more specific, it exists as a helix, like our DNA strands. And so, as we move forward with our lives, we are doing so in a circular pattern. And so, what do I mean by circular pattern? If you were to look at your timeline and the decisions you've made and the consequences of those decisions, you probably start to see a pattern of behavior emerge. You would see yourself making the same mistakes over and over. The situation and players might change, but you're probably getting the exact same results. And when I say this, I'm saying, like, if you're feeling unhappy or stuck or just kind of in the daily grind, chances are you're living out patterns that were created in your childhood that continue to play out into adulthood. And the only way to get out of those patterns is to acknowledge them and learn from them and then work to change them. And so it's really imperative to look at your life honestly and try to find those patterns that you're playing out. And I'm in a perfect example of this. I've worked in the restaurant industry pretty much my entire adult life. I would have a 2 to 3 year cycle where I would start a job and it was cool and it was fun and I dug it for a minute, but then I would start to see these little injustices and they would get stuck under my craw. I would hate my managers, whatever. I would quit, find another restaurant job, and just start it all over again. And I did this for 10 years. It honestly took Leah, my business partner Leah, who's been my friend since high school, being like, Corinne, when are you gonna stop this finally? Because you're not doing anything to get out of this. You just keep going back to it. Funny enough, she also happened to be the solution to get me out of that, and we started White Root Tarot. I stayed in those patterns because even though I was miserable, I was comfortably miserable. It was the devil that I knew. Like, I knew that I was living out this pattern that was making me miserable, but there was comfort in that knowing. And it's a big risk to get out of it because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with White Root Tarot. We were in our very beginnings, and I'm excited, but I'm also a little terrified because it's all a risk. However, you can't find happiness doing the same thing over and over that is making you miserable to begin with. So it's absolutely worth sitting down and really looking at your own patterns of belief. You're like to really look at all of the decisions that you've made in recent history and kind of put your thumb on what you're afraid of and what you're playing out over and over again. Especially if you're feeling stagnant. So that's what the Tzolkin's really kind of talking to us about. Our relationship with time and our relationship with the patterns that we play out through time. So definitely give that a shot. Sit through it. And really be honest with yourself about what's keeping you stuck in those patterns. And remember that there is always a way out and there's always a way to change things for the better. And we here at White Root, I mean, we go through the same thing. We can completely empathize with it, and we would like to help you unearth those patterns. And we'd like to help you find a way out of those patterns and start new ones that benefit you. So thank you so much for listening, you guys. We hope to do this every single week. I hope you enjoyed it and have a great day. We'll see you again soon. Bye.